It is 12:43 in the morning, and the room is lit by a single screen. A thumb moves upward through an endless column of certainty. Every headline confirms something already suspected. Every comment says the same thing with greater confidence. The opposing voices disappeared slowly. One account was blocked after an argument. Another was unfollowed because its post became exhausting. A friend stopped sending articles after learning that disagreement always ended with silence. Nothing about the room feels dangerous. It feels peaceful. There is no embarrassment, no hesitation, and no sentence that forces the mind to stop. Everything arrives already shaped to fit the person receiving it. This is how intellectual isolation often begins. Not with locked doors, forbidden books, or an authority deciding what may be spoken. It begins with comfort. It begins when almost every unpleasant idea can be removed. The result does not feel like ignorance. It feels like clarity. The world becomes easier to explain because fewer explanations remain visible. Eventually, certainty becomes so familiar that contradiction begins to feel unnatural. Intellectual isolation is not the comfort of being surrounded by people who agree with you. It is the slow decay of a mind that can no longer survive contact with contradiction. The first thing such a mind loses is not intelligence. It loses the ability to notice when intelligence has become a servant. Most people imagine bad thinking as a lack of information. Someone believes something false because they have not read enough, traveled enough, or listened carefully enough. Give them the facts, and the mistake should dissolve. The assumption feels reasonable because facts appear solid. But information does not enter an empty mind. It enters a structure filled with loyalties, memories, fears, and unfinished arguments. Before evidence can alter a belief, it must pass through the person who needs that belief to remain intact. Sometimes the mind is searching for truth. Sometimes it is searching for relief. Psychologists Ari Kruglansky and Donna Webster studied what they called the need for cognitive closure. It describes a desire for a firm answer and an aversion to unresolved ambiguity. When that need rises, people grasp early information quickly and preserve the judgment it creates. Uncertainty begins to feel more painful than error. They described two movements. The mind seizes upon a conclusion because uncertainty has become uncomfortable. Then it freezes around that conclusion, reducing exploration and resisting later information. Relief arrives first, and the person mistakes relief for accuracy. Imagine hearing footsteps in a hallway after midnight. The sound stops outside your door. For several seconds, not knowing feels worse than any explanation. The mind produces a story before it produces evidence. The same process occurs in ordinary rooms. A manager decides why an employee failed. A parent decides why a child has become distant. A voter decides what kind of person could support the opposing side. Once the explanation settles, new details no longer arrive neutrally. They either strengthen the story or threaten it. The story becomes less like a hypothesis and more like a wall. Every new fact is asked to choose a side. The need for closure is not a permanent defect found only in rigid people. It rises under time pressure, fatigue, noise, stress, and fear. The more urgently the mind wants an answer, the less evidence it may examine before accepting one. Confusion can make curiosity feel dangerous. This explains why intellectual isolation often deepens during periods of instability. When the world becomes difficult to predict, people do not always become more open. They may become more loyal to the first system that makes uncertainty disappear. Certainty becomes emotional shelter. A person wakes in the morning and opens a social platform before leaving bed. The screen learns quickly. It notices which faces hold attention, which words cause anger, and which stories receive immediate approval. It does not need to understand the person. It only needs to predict the next movement of the thumb. Over time, prediction becomes curation, and curation begins to resemble a world. The feed becomes a climate. The user forgets that it was built from repeated choices. Research across major social platforms has found patterns of homophily and selective exposure. People gather around compatible narratives, and information circulates repeatedly within those communities. The strength of the effect varies from platform to platform. The general movement remains familiar. We follow the voices that explain us sympathetically. We mute the voices that describe our position without mercy. We call one source trustworthy because it confirms our suspicions. We call another biased because it disturbs them. A large Facebook experiment altered users' exposure to politically like-minded sources during the American election of 2020. The intervention changed what participants saw. It did not produce measurable change across several pre-registered political attitudes. The result weakened a simple explanation. Changing the feed does not automatically change the structure beneath it. The room is partly built by software, but the lock may sit deeper. Removing familiar voices does not necessarily remove the need for those voices. Exposure alone does not create openness. A mind can encounter disagreement every day and still remain isolated. It can read opposing evidence and use each encounter to strengthen its original position. The contrary idea is technically present. It never enters in a form capable of doing damage. In 1979, Charles Lord, Lee Ross, and Mark Lepper recruited people with strong opposing views on capital punishment. Participants examined research that appeared to support deterrence and research that appeared to challenge it. Both sides rated the evidence favoring their original belief more positively. The same material widened the distance between them. The disturbing part was not simple avoidance. Participants did not merely refuse to look at unwelcome evidence. They examined it more critically and found more reasons to reject it. Their reasoning remained active. It simply worked under different instructions. When evidence offered support, the mind asked whether it could be accepted. When evidence threatened the belief, the mind asked whether it could be destroyed. The same intelligence performed both tasks. This is why educated people can become exceptionally difficult to challenge. Knowledge provides insight, but it also provides arguments, distinctions, and technical objections. A sophisticated mind can protect a fragile identity with great skill. Intelligence does not decide which motive it serves. This creates a strange form of isolation. The opposing view remains visible, but only in a weakened version. It arrives simplified, distorted, and translated into language the listener already knows how to defeat. The door appears open. Nothing genuinely unfamiliar is allowed to cross it intact. A person may claim to understand every opposing argument, while knowing only its least convincing form. They are not protected from disagreement. They are protected from the strongest version of disagreement. Groups intensify this process. Agreement does not merely confirm a position. Under certain conditions, discussion among like-minded people moves the group toward a more extreme version of its original direction. Conversation can sharpen certainty without adding much truth. Imagine 6 people gathered around a kitchen table. At first, each carries a mild suspicion. No one feels entirely certain, and several still hold private doubts. Then one person offers a reason, another adds an example. A third remembers a story that seems to prove the same point. No new authority enters the room. No decisive evidence appears. Yet each person hears several arguments supporting a position that previously felt private. Suspicion begins to feel socially confirmed. Confidence rises because agreement is visible. By the end of the evening, the group holds a stronger position than any individual held upon arrival. This can happen inside political movements, companies, families, academic fields, and intimate relationships. Wherever belonging depends upon shared interpretation, disagreement carries more than an intellectual cost. It risks embarrassment, exclusion, and loss of status. The mind adapts before the person notices. In the 1980s, Gerald Stasser and William Titus studied how groups combine information during decision-making. Their experiments showed that discussions often focused on facts everyone already shared. Unique information held by individual members received less attention. The group could possess the missing answer and still fail to use it. Imagine a committee choosing between 3 candidates. Each member receives a folder containing common information, along with several details known only to them. The hidden details collectively favor a candidate who initially looks weaker. No single person sees the full picture. The meeting begins. One person mentions a fact everyone remembers. Heads nod around the table. Another repeats a shared concern, and confidence rises. The private details remain in separate folders. The group leaves believing it examined everything, because everyone spoke. In reality, the most important information never became collective. It remained trapped inside individual minds. This is intellectual isolation inside a crowded room. The information exists. The people carrying it are present. Nothing prevents them from speaking except the invisible gravity of what the group already knows. This exposes a flaw in the popular image of collective intelligence. A group does not become wise merely because its members possess diverse information. Diversity must survive long enough to enter discussion. Difference must remain visible after consensus begins to form. When consensus arrives too early, information starts serving the emerging decision. The group stops asking which conclusion best fits the facts. It starts selecting which facts best fit the conclusion. Thought becomes decoration around loyalty. Some institutions eventually reward fluency over warning. Then a product fails, a policy collapses, or a trusted leader behaves exactly as a dismissed critic predicted. By then, the organization may have forgotten how to process contradiction. It knows only how to punish the person delivering it. Disagreement can be dishonest, uninformed, theatrical, or cruel. A person does not become valuable merely by standing alone. Yet the cognitive value of dissent does not always depend upon the dissenter being correct. Sometimes an incorrect challenge improves everyone's thinking. Charlene Nemeth's research on minority influence found that a consistent minority position can encourage divergent thinking. People become more likely to consider alternatives and examine the problem from additional directions. The minority may still be wrong. The room becomes less automatic. Minority influence creates a different movement. The person must ask why anyone would see the problem differently. That question opens roots that agreement had closed. Even a failed answer can reveal a neglected possibility. A difficult colleague may expose the assumption beneath an entire plan. The group may resent the interruption because friction feels inefficient. Yet a machine without friction can also lose control. Smooth movement is not always safe movement. This is where the subject becomes personal. It is easy to imagine intellectual isolation as a disease affecting fanatics, extremists, or people trapped in obvious propaganda. The image protects us by placing the danger somewhere else. Most private echo chambers contain no slogans. They are built around stories about work, love, betrayal, and blame. A relationship ends, and one person tells the story until every detail points toward a single villain. Friends learn which interpretation brings gratitude and which creates anger. Sympathy becomes editorial control. Months later, the story has become perfectly coherent. Every contradiction has disappeared. So has the possibility that coherence was purchased by removing part of the truth. The wound remains real, but the explanation becomes absolute. People can live inside conclusions that decide the meaning of evidence before it arrives. The argument continues, but nothing can change. Each person speaks from inside a sealed story. The other has become a character, not a mind. The body often notices contradiction before conscious thought does. The shoulders tighten. The jaw hardens. Attention shifts from understanding the sentence to preparing a response. The speaker has not finished, yet an answer already waits behind the teeth. At that moment, disagreement is no longer only about an idea. It has touched identity. The mind begins defending not only what is believed, but the person who would remain if that belief collapsed. A political belief can answer who deserves compassion. A professional belief can answer whether a career was built wisely. A family belief can answer who caused years of pain. Changing such a belief may threaten more than being wrong. It may threaten innocence, belonging, status, and the meaning of past sacrifice. The mind does not defend all ideas equally. Some opinions sit on the surface, others hold the architecture together. These load-bearing beliefs cannot be inspected safely. Every serious challenge feels like an attempt at demolition. Fragility begins to imitate strength. It must ridicule, interrupt, redefine, or leave. A belief that cannot remain alive while another interpretation occupies the room is not secure. It depends upon environmental protection. The louder the defense, the weaker the shelter may be. Modern digital life makes that protection unusually easy. A person can move through news, entertainment, friendship, and community while encountering little sustained opposition. Contrary views still appear, but often in their most provocative forms. They arrive already stripped of complexity. A screenshot is selected because it is stupid. A short clip is cut because it is outrageous. An anonymous insult becomes representative of an entire group. The opposing side appears only through its worst performer. This does not challenge the mind. It trains the mind to feel superior to challenge. The other side becomes associated with ridicule before its strongest case is ever heard. Contempt replaces curiosity. Soon, there seems no reason to investigate a position already represented by a shouting stranger beneath a video. The person feels informed because conflict is everywhere. Yet none of the conflict requires genuine reconsideration. Noise creates the illusion of exposure. This is not accidental in an attention economy. Calm disagreement struggles to compete with humiliation, outrage, and moral spectacle. The most useful challenger is often less visible than the most offensive enemy. Algorithms reward reaction, not revision. A person can therefore feel surrounded by opposition while remaining intellectually isolated. Every day contains conflict. None of it survives long enough to disturb the interior structure. The mind becomes fluent in rejecting people it has never understood. This distinction matters because forced exposure can harden attitudes. Christopher Bale and his colleagues conducted a field experiment involving politically identified Twitter users. Participants followed a bot that shared messages from the opposing political side. The intervention did not reliably produce moderation. Among Republican participants in the study, attitudes moved in a more polarized direction. The finding had limits, and it should not become a universal law. Different platforms, cultures, and methods may produce different outcomes. Still, the result damaged a comforting belief. More opposition does not automatically create more openness. A stranger entering your home to insult everything you value does not become a teacher merely because they disagree. Challenge without trust can activate defense rather than reflection. The form of dissent matters. Timing matters. The perceived intention of the speaker matters. A person may reconsider an idea when challenged by someone who has listened carefully. The same person may harden when confronted by an audience seeking victory. The argument can remain identical, while the social meaning changes. This is why public debate often fails as a model of intellectual growth. The visible goal is not always discovery. It may be domination, performed for spectators. Each side listens for weakness. Concession becomes dangerous because it will be interpreted as defeat. The conversation rewards certainty, even when uncertainty would be more honest. Performance replaces inquiry. Real cognitive friction is quieter. An idea remains in the mind after the conversation ends. It returns while dishes are washed, or while traffic lights slide across a wet windscreen. The person does not change immediately. They may feel irritated for hours, but the opposing thought survives long enough to interact with memories the speaker never saw. It enters the private space where identity is less defended. Revision begins without applause. This process cannot be forced by volume. It requires a small internal interval in which the mind does not need to win. That interval may last only seconds. Within it, thought remains alive. Most people have known someone who once created that space. A teacher questioned a confident answer without humiliation. A friend noticed the missing detail in a story. A colleague asked one more question after everyone else had agreed. Perhaps that person became exhausting. Perhaps they were removed from the inner circle because every conversation felt heavier around them. Life became easier afterward. The old story stopped encountering resistance. Then something else stopped as well. The mind lost an instrument for detecting distortion. Relief arrived, and its hidden price remained invisible. Peace returned because correction disappeared. There is a kind of friend who never allows complete innocence. They can offer sympathy without accepting every explanation. They understand pain without turning pain into proof. Such a person is difficult to keep close. They deny the pleasure of being entirely justified. Without them, private mythology expands. Every conflict proves persecution. Every failure proves sabotage. Every success proves superior judgment. The self becomes the hero of a story with no surviving editor. Nothing remains to ask which scenes were removed. The narrative grows cleaner as the person becomes less knowable. This does not mean every accusation deserves equal attention. Some people distort, manipulate, and attack. Protecting oneself from abuse is not intellectual cowardice. Some doors must close. The danger begins when every form of discomfort receives the same name. Criticism becomes toxicity. Disagreement becomes disrespect. A boundary becomes a fortress. Then the person loses the ability to distinguish a threat from a challenge. Both produce the same internal alarm. The easiest response is removal. Block the account. End the conversation. Leave the group. Sometimes removal preserves sanity. Sometimes it preserves an illusion. The action looks identical from outside. The difference appears slowly in what the mind becomes afterward. Does it become clearer and more capable of examining itself, or merely more certain that examination was never necessary? No external observer can answer this completely. The person inside the room may be least able to tell. Relief can hide both healing and decay. Hugo Mercier and Dan Sperber propose that human reasoning developed largely within a social context. People produce reasons, evaluate claims, and navigate communication where trust cannot be automatic. Reasoning, in this view, is deeply connected to argument. It is not only private calculation, The theory does not claim that solitary thought is worthless. It suggests that some weaknesses of individual reasoning become visible through exchange. People may be biased when producing support for their own views. They can become more discerning when evaluating arguments offered by others. Reason, in this picture, is not a lamp carried by an isolated individual through darkness. It is closer to a tool passed between people. Each person finds weaknesses the other cannot see from inside their own position. Thought becomes distributed. This creates an uncomfortable possibility. Intellectual independence may not mean freedom from other minds. It may depend upon regular contact with minds that resist us. Independence may be partly social. A person alone can produce reasons indefinitely. Each new reason can grow from the same hidden premise. Without opposition, the structure becomes larger without becoming more accurate. Complexity can disguise circularity. A community of identical thinkers can perform the same illusion collectively. They examine, debate, publish, and refine. Yet every path leads toward a shared foundation no one may question. Activity continues around a protected center. From inside, this feels like intellectual progress. The vocabulary improves. The arguments become more sophisticated. The group becomes better at explaining why it was right yesterday. From outside, the entire system may be circling. The threat is not merely that people become wrong. Everyone is wrong about many things. The deeper threat is losing the flexibility required to discover error. A flexible mind can experience contradiction without instantly converting it into hostility. It can hold an unwelcome possibility before deciding whether to accept it. That interval may last only a few seconds. Within it, a different future remains possible. An isolated mind shortens the interval. Contradiction becomes threat, and threat demands immediate removal. Eventually, the response occurs before the content has been understood. The mind no longer evaluates the idea. It evaluates whether the idea feels like home. Familiarity becomes a substitute for truth. Discomfort becomes evidence of danger. The person remains intelligent, but intelligence now protects the walls. Return to the room at 12:43. The screen still glows against the dark wall. The feed continues moving beneath a quiet thumb. Every voice is familiar. Every conflict has already been settled. Nothing arrives without an obvious moral category attached. The person feels informed because information never stops. They feel independent because no authority dictates what must be read. They feel free because every unwanted voice can disappear with a touch. Yet freedom has a strange requirement. A person must remain capable of entering a room where the furniture is not arranged for them. They must survive an intelligent stranger. They must endure the moment when another person describes the world differently. They must tolerate the possibility that the stranger has noticed something real. Without that capacity, choice becomes ceremonial. The menu expands while the mind narrows. The person may select among thousands of sources. Every source protects the same interior structure. The walls become invisible because they are made from preference. The door remains visible because no one has physically locked it. But each time the person approaches, contradiction feels like danger. So the door stays closed. No guard is needed. The body performs the confinement. There may be no clean solution. Dissent can enlighten, but it can also injure. Agreement can create blindness, but it can also create trust, cooperation, and necessary rest. A mind cannot remain open to every voice. Attention is finite. Some doors must close. The unresolved question is which doors protect thought and which slowly replace it. The difference is rarely obvious at the moment of closing. Perhaps intellectual isolation begins when we no longer remember why a voice was removed. We remember only the relief that followed. The absence becomes part of the architecture. Silence starts to feel natural. Years later, certainty may still stand. It may speak fluently and defend itself with impressive precision. Beneath the language, something essential may have weakened. The mind has not forgotten how to argue. It has forgotten how to be altered. That loss rarely announces itself. It arrives as calm, confidence, and the disappearance of friction. The person calls it peace. A mind that is never challenged may continue believing it is free, long after it has lost the ability to leave the room.